The silk bindings couldn't hold her body still, but the drugs did. Beneath her, the cold of the metal slab leached into the skin of her back and upper arms, but there was nothing to be felt below her waist. There was no feeling at all. She focused on the red sliver of light, slicing the dark in half with the exactness of a razor blade, an ominous line scribed through the middle of nothingness. It pulsed, as if emitted by a laser, dividing the length of her almost surgically, between her breasts rising and falling rapidly with heaving lungs, filling and purging in a confused panic that had arrived the moment she regained consciousness, just 1 minute before. The light split the shallow trough of her belly, erasing the shadow of her navel, and illuminated the union of her legs, held open by lashings she could not feel. The muffled stirrings from a human gathering emanated from beyond the black, from beyond the light, and sounded like a large crowd was gathered in the room above her. She could move only her head and eyes, and did so slowly, scanning the void with trepidation, not wanting to find the terrifying truth that now invaded her mind. But there was only the red light and the rapid rise and fall of her chest. Her tongue, thick and dry, filled her mouth. She forced it through parched lips to separate them as much as they would allow, her body begging for more oxygen. Cool air rushed in with each breath, and for a short while, she focused on her breathing, hopelessly trying to calm herself. She spoke in a hesitant whisper. "Is someone there?" The only response was a faint echo of her words, returning from hard walls some unseen distance away. She wished it to be just a horrible dream, a nightmare to be ended by a shift of her mind or the wail of an alarm. But this was no dream from which she could be awakened. "God, please help me." A throbbing rhythm seemed to descend upon her, growing louder, pushing through the din of human sounds above. At first she thought it to be the cadence of her heart, blood drumming inside her ears. But the throbbing and her pulse were not the same. The first was firm and steady, compressing the air around her, as if giant hands were gripping and releasing her flesh with every beat. The other was violent, dissonant, pounding through the whole of her body, fighting the drugs that fogged her mind and held her still, racing to the very tips of her fingers and back, vanishing into the paralysis below her waist, only to return with the suddenness of electricity. Something clicked. The slab jolted and began to rise. It shuddered briefly in a chorus of mechanical clatter, then settled into a dull, menacing vibration. She felt the space tighten between her and the approaching ceiling she could not see. Without warning, the darkness split open, and for a moment left her blinded by the exploding razor of light. Then the light was gone, and the table stopped. The awful pulsing sound went silent. Lonely red spears burned across the surface of her eyes and slowly disappeared. The darkness was absolute and quite deafening. Time paused between one nightmare and the next, and in that solitary fragment of her existence, her fear became unbearable. She tossed her head side to side, searching for evidence of the human gathering, afraid she might still be alone, and more afraid that she wasn't. But all she could find was a very faint ringing in her ears, and a distant hissing noise, like steam releasing from a valve. Then she smelled the gas. Someone coughed. A ring of fire ignited above her, flaring violently in every direction. Instinctively, she tried to arch her back and roll away from the flash, but the drugs would not allow it. The wave of heat washed over her, then dissipated quickly as the fire settled into a steady, ominous glow. She refused the warmth that had offered her cold skin. All she could think about was the threat of the flames and the painful death they would bring. Surely the table would rise again to feed her to the burning mouth of hell. But the table didn't move, and the flames stayed away. She turned her gaze from the fire and saw that it had filled the darkness with blue. Not a kind blue, like the sky, but a dim death blue that washed life from every living thing it touched. Dozens of them, bare men and women, entangled in a circle around her, like a human coil of chain, one body barely discernible from the next, their faces and flesh masked with hideous applications of paint, their mouths and tongues distorted in perverted lust, the death blue flickering in every staring eye. Her tears fell to the table. She wanted to scream, but was terrified that was the sound they had come to hear.